Good afternoon. I'm going to call this field hearing on January 6th to order. From time to time, members of Congress hold field hearings to function as force multipliers for the investigative, analytical, and legislative work of our various committees. We are now moving toward the appropriations process, where we'll have to make key decisions about authorities and capabilities within the Department of Justice and the FBI. And it is my hope that we get a more fulsome understanding of the events of January 6th and the follow-on actions that have concerned many of us in the Congress regarding people's treatment and civil rights. And to start our hearing today, we've got a short video.
Despite millions of Americans watching the events of January 6th unfold on their TV screens, there have been several conspiracy theories, including one that the federal government facilitated the riot.
The existence of unnamed, as yet uncharged co-conspirators does not mean that they were working undercover for the FBI.
That is the crux of this FBI conspiracy.
And all of these conspiracy theory allegations have been debunked up and down.
How many FBI agents or confidential informants actively participated in the events of January 6th?
Sir, I can't answer that.
Did the FBI have confidential human sources embedded within the January 6th protesters?
As I'm sure you can appreciate, I have to be very careful about what I can say about when we do and do not, and where we have and have not used confidential human sources.
Why can't you just send us, give us access to the 11,000 hours of video that's available? Because there may be UC's undercover officers or CHS's confidential human sources on those videos whose identity we need to protect.
There might have been some kind of potential federal involvement with the activities on January 6th, and I thought it was important enough that it warranted our attention.
There must be moments where you think, if we would have known, if we could have infiltrated this group or found out what they were doing. And that, do you have those moments?
Absolutely. And in that testimony to the Senate, you believe that Christopher Wray indicated that there were no confidential informants and no FBI assets that were present at the Capitol on January 6th that were part of the violent riot. Isn't that right?
Yes, sir.
The Washington field office told Boston, well, you know what, we can't give you the evidence because it might disclose the very CIs and UCs that you are concerned about. So much of our work has uncovered some of the things that initially were deemed as conspiracy theories, but we now have sworn evidence to prove. But that is not the end of the story. The critical feature of our gathering today is to better understand how people were treated in the follow-on to January 6th. And in that regard, I'm very pleased to welcome our witnesses. Jeff Clark is currently Senior Fellow and Director of Litigation at the Center for Renewing America. He is former Acting Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Division, holding that time during the Trump administration after being confirmed by the Senate. Jeff served as the Senate-confirmed Assistant Attorney General for the Environment and Natural Resources Division. He holds degrees from Harvard University in Economics and Russian History, from the University of Delaware in Urban Affairs, and from the Georgetown University Law Center. Outside of politics, Jeff serves as professor at the George Mason School of Law, and he has been an attorney at Kirkland & Ellis. We also have today with us Ed Martin. Ed is president of the Eagle Forum Education and Legal Defense Fund. Formerly, Ed Martin was a member of the Republican National Committee and chaired the Missouri Republican Party. As an attorney in the private sector, Ed's legal work involved him with the Institute for Justice and Human Action Network and the Americans United for Life. He possesses degrees in medical ethics and philosophy, served as Missouri Governor Matt Blunt's chief of staff, and he currently hosts the Pro America Reports podcast. We're also joined today by Jerry Perna. Jerry Perna's nephew, Matthew Perna, was a January 6th defendant who was subjected to months of delays by the justice system. Matthew was charged for entering the Capitol on January 6th, but peacefully surrendered to authorities. Matthew's sentencing was scheduled for March 2022, but this was delayed by the prosecution. Mr. Perna took his own life. His friends and family say that the sentencing delays broke him. Jerry Perna currently runs a website to raise awareness for her nephew's story, rememberingmattperna.com. We're also joined today by Sarah Maccabee. Sarah is the wife of Ronald Maccabee, who entered the Capitol on January 6th. a deputy sheriff. Ronald suffered aggravated a shoulder injury that day while attempting to render medical assistance to a protester, Roseanne Boyland. He has since been charged with 7 crimes, among them assaulting, resisting, or impeding a federal officer. Ronald pleaded not guilty to these charges, and video footage shows McAbee protecting and helping multiple Capitol officers who thank him for his assistance. Together, Sarah and her husband have faced crippling legal bills, a coordinated smear campaign, manipulated evidence, and Ronald remains in prison without a sentence. We're also joined today by Brandon Straka, the founder of the Walk Away campaign. Straka runs this organization, a 501c3, a political action committee, a social media campaign, and a grassroots-style political movement. Brandon was charged with disorderly conduct as a result of his presence at the Capitol on January 6th and was subsequently sentenced to 3 years of probation with 3 months of home detention. He additionally incurred thousands in fines. We're also joined today by John Strand. John is a model, writer, actor, musician, and host of Frontline Flash. During the COVID-19 pandemic, John led the Beverly Hills Freedom Rally in 2020 to defy California's lockdown orders. In support of Dr. Simone Gold, John worked as the communications director as well as the creative director of her organization, America's Frontline Doctors. John has since been sentenced to more than 2 years in prison for his presence at the Capitol on January 6th. We thank our witnesses for joining us. I'm joined currently by my colleague, Paul Gosar of Arizona, but we may have other members that I know are watching and observing this from their movements about the Capitol and who may join us as well. Mr. Clark, you've submitted written testimony. All of the testimony from today and all of the record that is being kept today will be available for members to submit for the official record of the House on the floor or for work in the Judiciary Committee upon which I serve or the Oversight Committee upon which Dr. Gosar and many of our other members serve. So thank you for your written testimony. We would ask you recognize.
Apologize if I'm a little late. I'm in another committee hearing. Important business, FAA reauthorization. We all want to have safe flights. I got involved with this real early on. I was in Congress for 3 days. I think, Marjorie, you too. We were in Congress for 3 days when this all took place. I was probably the last member, if not the last member on the House floor that day. I'm an old law enforcement officer for 30 years as a sheriff of a large county for 8 years. So I stood at the back doors, the main back doors leading into the chambers. Had a conversation with an individual on the outside, and anyway, it was a few weeks after that I was approached by then Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy asking me to read the Senate version, the Senate reports, because you know the Senate had some hearings early on. I think it was in March and April. So Kevin McCarthy approached me and asked me to read all those reports and write a report on what my feelings and my thoughts were because of my extensive law enforcement experience. And I did so. I provided him a 14-page document. And when I looked at the report and the OIG recommendations and everything that I saw, what was wrong that day, January 6th, folks, was a law enforcement failure, an epic law enforcement failure. When Leader McCarthy, now Speaker McCarthy, asked me to be one of the 5 on the January 6th Select Committee. I was honored to be asked to, and then obviously Nancy Pelosi did what nobody else has done as Speaker, rejected Minority Leader's picks to be on a Select Committee. So we weren't on the committee, and she picked a couple of rhinos and that whole committee is all about Donald Trump. Anyway, so when you look at January 6th and you read the special event assessments, because I spent a lot of time on this, and when you look at the December 15th, the December 30th, and the January 3rd special events assessment, we knew that things were going to get ugly up here. It was quite clear. We knew that the Capitol itself, they meaning the leadership of the Capitol Police, i.e. an Assistant Chief Pittman, who's no longer here, they had all the intelligence. They had all the intelligence that it was going to get ugly up here. Extremist groups from both sides, white supremacist groups, I mean, high propensity for violence. They knew thousands of people were coming. And it was glaring in that January 3rd report. It was on page 12 out of the 14. And it said things are getting stupid. And I believe, me personally, I believe that they hid the intelligence. It's like they wanted this to happen. I say that because you remember Harry Dunn, one of the first officers, he testified, he was one of the 4. Harry Dunn's testimony says, he goes, I didn't think it was going to be any different than any other day. Kind of like the big marches they had November and December, relatively nonviolent. He didn't think this was going to be like any other day. And so when you look at the hours and hours of video, you see most of the Capitol police officers don't have any type of shields or stuff. It was the Metropolitan Police that came prepared. But the U.S. Capitol Police, I spent some time and I focused a lot of my time on the shooting of and the killing of Ashley Babbitt. I document this very well. I was probably one of the first. I think, Paul, you said it as well. I believe Ashley Babbitt was murdered that day. Now, you say, well, how could you say that? I said, well, I'm a sheriff. I've had deputies shoot and kill people. I've had my own deputies shot and killed. The point is, I know a little bit about use of force. And what disturbed me about that investigation into Lieutenant Byrd is it never went to a grand jury. You want to have the vote of confidence of the American people. Send every law enforcement shooting, justified, questionable, whatever. Send it to a grand jury. It never went to a grand jury. Most of the people in the Capitol Police will even tell you. They'll tell you that, hey, this was a quick investigation. Lieutenant Byrd, and I hope when we have a new president in 2 years that he goes to a grand jury. That shooting should go to a grand jury. And that's my commitment to you, Ashley, to Ms. Babbitt. If I can do anything, that should go to a grand jury at a minimum. My point is I'm just going to leave you at this. When you look at those special event assessments in that January 3rd, I had an opportunity to talk to then the National Guard commander, and I said to him, I said, General, I said, if you read that report, the National Guard should have been on our nation's capital on January 4th. He agreed with me. If you would have read the report, it justified, the intelligence was there. And General Walker said to me, the National Guard would have been on our nation's capital on January 4th like the intelligence suggested. January 6th would have never happened. So then what happens? We win the House. And where does Miss Pittman go? She's got a nice cushy job now, UC Berkeley, making $200,000 a year. Nancy found her a job. Nancy found her a job. Apparently, Matt, I guess she was up here last week for House admin. I don't know, but I wish I had 5 minutes with her. Because I'm telling you, if there's one person that to me could have prevented this from taking place, it's Miss Pittman. And she should be held accountable. Because it was one of the darkest days in our nation's history. One of the darkest days, and they just sat on the intelligence. Shameful. We can never allow it to happen again. And I'm going to end with this, but Marjorie was talking about everybody, Donald Trump speaking in the ellipse. The first breach that took place at about 1:10 p.m., Donald Trump was still speaking. It was a 22-block walk. It takes you a half hour to walk from, so no. And you see Ray, Mr. Ray, right? Whispering in the guy's ear, boom. And they put bicycle racks. Think about that. Tens of thousands of people coming up. What are we going to have for a perimeter? A damn bicycle rack that couldn't keep your cat in your yard, right? I mean, none of this just made sense. So these are some of the things we wanted to do on that select committee because I thought I could have exposed them for who they truly are. This is all about Donald Trump coming back in 2024. Shame on them. But the greatest leader in my lifetime, folks, keep the faith. He's coming back.
Gõ cửa trái tim van anh được vào, dù tình xót đau chung thân huyết đau, ngủ vùi với chim bao nỗi niềm mắt xanh xao, nhưng em vẫn ngóng tim anh mở cửa. Gõ cửa trái tim sao anh hững hờ, ngõ hồn tái tê năm canh thẫn thờ, nhện lòng mắc răng tơ để một mối bơ vơ khi không anh nhốt em trong đợi chờ. Ôi cứ tim anh bằng vàng nên tiếng kêu nghe bẽ bàng, để em gõ cửa miên man mà anh không chút oan han. Em buồn lang thang gõ cửa trái tim, nghe xa nghìn trùng đèn mờ hắt hiu cô đơn tận cùng, đàn lỡ phím sai cung, tình này cũng mông lung. Tim anh ai khóa để em lạnh lùng. Gõ cửa trái tim van anh được vào, dù tình xót đau chung thân huyệt đau, ngủ vui với chim bao nỗi niềm mắt xanh xao, nhưng em vẫn ngóng tim anh mở cửa. Gõ cửa trái tim sao anh hững hờ, ngõ hồn tái tê năm canh thẫn thờ, nhện lòng mắc răng tơ để một môi bơ vơ, khi không anh nhốt em trong đợi chờ. Tim anh bằng vàng nên tiếng kêu nghe bẽ bàng, để em gõ cửa miên man mà anh không chút oan han. Em buồn lang thang gõ cửa trái tim, nghe xa nghìn trùng đèn mờ hắt hiu cô đơn tận cùng, đàn lỡ phím sai cung, tình này cũng mông lung. Tim anh ai khóa để em lạnh lùng. Đàn lỡ phím sai cung, tình này cũng